Are you familiar with FBI Special Agents Kyle Seraphin?
I'm familiar with the name.
Is that yes?
I'm familiar with the name. Familiar with the name. Familiar with the name.
Let's bring in Kyle Seraphin. He's the FBI whistleblower who helped expose government censorship of our First Amendment rights.
Now, we only have this memo because a recently suspended FBI agent called Kyle Seraphin brought it to the public. And we're grateful that he did. Kyle, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
He's the host of something that strangely is called the Kyle Seraphin Show.
Kyle Seraphin, I can't thank you enough for speaking out. I knew you guys were out there, and I knew it was just a matter of time, but you got a lot of guts putting your face and your name to this. You're doing a service on behalf of the American people, and from the bottom of my cracked and broken heart sometimes, thank you very much.
Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. And today is Monday. It is December the 30th. We're rolling live. I see the chat is all there. Thanks for joining us this morning, folks, as we kind of come to an end of the year. And we're going to end the year in the middle of the week, which is a little bit unusual, I guess. What are you going to do? But I see the gang is all here, so we might as well get started. Today's episode actually kicked off about 3 a.m. this morning when I was awakened by a noise in my house. I have no idea what it was. And then I couldn't get back to sleep, as I am wont to do. My brain was churning. What am I going to be doing today? What's coming up? What is happening that I need to be able to explain? And it occurred to me that we're seeing an attack on the MAGA, which we kind of alluded to on Friday. There's an attack on the MAGA, put that in air quotes, the loomer types. But it's because people are majoring in the minors. They are focusing on the minutia. They are dealing with details that are not the bigger picture. We're seeing folks get granular when the beginning of the Trump administration, which is going to take over on January the 21st, really needs to be a broad focus. There are many things to fix in this country, and getting really, really specific about very, very small problems that probably do bother some people, but they are not the biggest thing, and they are not the reason that Donald Trump got elected. This is what you're seeing. You're seeing stress and grief over things that actually should not be a distraction, but they are being used to great effect by those who can distract us. And in the meantime, there's some shenanigans going in the background. I think we will play some of that today. Before we get started, let's go ahead and say thanks to my friends over at the Patriot Cooler Company. There it is. It's patriotcoolers.com. The promo code KYLE will save you 10% if you choose to get something so fine as one of these 16-ounce coffee mugs. They are fantastic for your desk. They are not great for fitting into your cup holder. If you want to put them in a cup holder of a vehicle, you might want something like this. This is the wood grain. Look, it matches our studio very, very nicely. Kind of funky to see that it's not actually wood, but I got a 20-ounce tumbler. Yeah, not only am I someone sponsored by Patriot Coolers, but I use their products, and I use them all the time to the point where my wife is looking at me going, another box from Patriot Coolers? Yes, another box. And we got 3 more of the 20-ounce. Why? Because I've been running around with the 30-ounce and the 40-ounce, and I thought that was superior. And then my folks came to visit me, and they had 20-ounce tumblers with suspendables badges on them, and I coveted them. I thought, I need one myself. And so I got one for the studio. And here it is. This is how they show up. They have a lovely little band on there letting you know that each one of your purchases is going to also help support veterans. It throws money back into the pockets of people that need to have their houses retrofitted. You can get the Suspendables collection. The link is in the show description, but it's always patriotcoolers.com, promo code KYLE. That's as long as we'll go on that. Let's get started with today's weirdness. And I used that little musical break to put the Patriot Cooler back on its spot in the shelf. Let's get started. There was a conversation happening in the Suspendables group chat. You guys have a group chat? Mine includes people like Steve Friend. It includes Garrett O'Boyle, George Hill, Marcus Allen, Chris Toompas, a couple of others, folks that don't need to have their name put out there publicly. The Suspendables group chat is pretty capable. And we have a lot of different reflections. And one of the reflections was a discussion about how this H1 or this H1B visa situation related to the fall of Rome. Yeah, we are those guys. We can't help it. While I'm mentioning it, though, I know we lost some people. We're going to talk about Jimmy Carter at the end of the show, just because the media, that's all on all of the front pages of ABC, CBS, NBC, et cetera, et cetera. They all want to just talk Jimmy Carter. We actually lost a wonderful person, and I only know her through her offspring. My friend Phil Kennedy lost his wife. Lost his mother, not his wife. Lost his mother this Christmas holiday. And so we pray for the repose of her soul and commend Teresa into our Heavenly Father, because I know that was something that was coming at us. That we lost good people. We lost Jimmy Carter as well. This is something we'll talk about as news, but some of the news is much more personal. So I just want to let you guys know that I actually have this feeling that many of you do, which is that there's also a sense of loss at the same time as celebrating the Christmas holiday and the new year and the birth of the new year and the fact that we're going into a new time. So we won't forget about this. And that all falls into this sort of this concept that nothing lasts forever. Nothing stays the same. And this was something that Phil sent me specifically. 10 lessons for the modern society about the fall of ancient Rome. And the first one is very telling because it has to do with our H1B visa situation. And the story is that overseas slave labor or imported slaves will not make your goods forever. You will never be able to keep a population down indefinitely. Eventually, it will come back to bite you. And so this was one of the things they say. At its peak, money was rushing into the Roman Empire. Emperors and governors and government were basking in an absolute avalanche of wealth, kind of like America did, at least for a period of time. It helped them control a better part of the known universe, but just because the nations around them didn't have nearly as much money, it didn't mean that the Roman people were getting rich. In fact, usually there's a wealth distribution issue. And then, in order to maintain that wealth distribution, instead of hiring their own people, the Romans went out and got foreign slaves. They, in fact, commissioned armies to go out. We've talked about some of this stuff with Jeremy Ryan Slate. If you guys want to go back and listen to a very good episode talking about the analogs of Rome, one of them was a loss of culture and currency, and the other was a loss of border. Once you start blurring those two, you start losing the thing that makes your nation great. And I think that's what Donald Trump tapped into with the MAGA movement. I think that part of the nostalgia of Make America Great Again is that America hit a high point, probably sometime in the late 80s or maybe in the early 90s. Those of us who lived through it have a very fond memory of it. And it's not just because we were coming of age or young people that were experiencing the freedom of America. There was a freer country. There were more opportunities. Money was not nearly as inflated as it is today. And so we have this sort of hope that there can be a greatness again. And people have started focusing in on one aspect, which was, by the way, the number 10 aspect in this particular article. The other ones are also interesting because I saw some pieces talking about Ozempic, which I guess is a shot. It's not a pill. But people become lazy. And obesity doesn't get a lot of sympathy, but apparently was also an issue in Rome. It's not that the average Roman was obese. It's just that they had issues with food and they started eating less healthy food. And we are seeing that. And if you guys live in households like mine, it's something we talk about. Our food supply. Maybe that's why the Make America Healthy Again campaign also rings true with Americans. The richer you get, that wealth distribution change, it means that just because things are available doesn't mean that they are good. They're not good for you. Another issue is that those who have the new wealth, this is number 8, the nouveau riche, the new money, they forget where they came from. They don't look around and say, I have money now, but I used to be just like you. They act like they've always had money because they want to be part of the permanent establishment. And that nouveau riche attitude of forgetting the origins is really problematic. Oftentimes, it's the second generation, by the way. The first generation may make the money, have a acute reminder of where they came from. And then the first generation that has inherited said wealth will immediately try to divorce itself from the lower sort of classes where they came from because they don't want to be associated with that. They'd like to be part of this newer establishment. They want to be thought of as having been wealthy forever. And when they do that, and if they do that, then they lose the thing that made them strong and capable and nimble and aggressive in the first place. So there's a lot of lessons in here. I'm going to put this out in, I don't want to go through all 10 of them because there are plenty of things we could talk about. But I want to put this in our locals channel. So if you guys haven't signed up for locals, it's kyleseraphin.com to get to the website. And that's where we have a lot of discussions. I'll put this in one of the links today. So it'll be the first link that you can click through under articles from episode 455, which is also kind of an interesting retrospective that we're at episode 455. It's a lot. We've done a lot in the last 2 years here. The number 7, by the way, which just popped up on my screen as well. People who are in debt can be controlled. These lessons have been around for thousands of years, literally thousands of years. And maybe that's the reason why so many people tend to look backwards and go, where are we going? You can almost always tell by where we've been. There are 2 ways that we tell how things work. One of them is through history. And that's what we're talking about here. Analytical history, historical fact. Are there analogs that go along with the things that have happened? And the other one is through literature, which is where we're going to end today, talking about the MAGA. We're going to talk about literature from Greek mythology, which didn't necessarily tell us what happened past tense, although some of them were explanatory stories about the way the world was and why it was. It was a bigger explanation of what happens present tense. And this was something that I remember from my sophomore English class. I still recall that, even at 43 years old. I recall sitting as a 16-year-old in Linda Felice's English class in Dallas, Texas, the Jesuit school I attended. And she said, history is what happened, literature is what happens, and Greek literature specifically has been with us for a very long time, telling us what happens across Western societies. Because Western society is different. We have a different outlook than those in the East. And that's also related to the way that this sort of H-1B situation, this immigrant visas of people coming in. If you're not familiar with the term, by the way, I should define it. H-1B visas are for quote unquote high-skilled workers, often used in the tech industry. And it is now being demonized. If we were to take social media as any indication of where sort of the popular sentiment is, people are pissed about it. And they're having their first sort of understanding and break with Donald Trump. They're looking around and saying, you know, I thought he was for us. And this is the problem with idolatry, folks. It's pretty straightforward. If you believe that one person, a human being, is going to save you, is going to always have the right answers, and you will always agree on them, then you will find out that you will be sorely disappointed because Donald Trump is his own man, always has been. He's got things that you don't agree with. He comes from a different background than you. He's probably got more money than you. I don't think we have any billionaires listening to the program. But if so, by all means, send us a comment. You can also email us. I put the email out there, and I've been getting some interesting emails. It's info@kyleseraphin.com if you guys want to send us some kind of information. If you're a billionaire and you're listening to this program, by all means, let us know you're out there because that's fun. But the odds are Donald Trump is not a lot like you in many ways. And people kind of projected this blue-collar billionaire status. He's just like us. He eats McDonald's, too. He also likes pretty ladies for wives. It turns out that's actually not that uncommon. So they're seeing this moment. This is the problem with being part of what the left has called a cult, and what even people on the right that are sort of in the never Trump category called cultish behavior. If you assume that everything you think and all of your ideas are going to be immediately transmitted into action by the person that is representing you, you don't understand how representatives work. He represents a bunch of other people too. He's now representing people, as we talked about, in sort of the center left and maybe the center right. If you consider yourself further on the right, the way that I often do, Donald Trump is not going to perfectly represent you, and that's okay. For those of us that didn't sign on and put the MAGA brand on our forehead and say, you must address me as the MAGA, the way Laura Loomer has been doing lately, who's a little bit of a wacko, at least sometimes. If you don't put that brand on your head, then you can look at it clearly and say, Donald Trump is obviously going to do things that I don't like. He's obviously going to go pick a labor secretary that looks like kind of like a Marxist. He's going to have some ideas that come out of New York because he grew up in New York, and New Yorkers are different than the rest of us. New Yorkers, you know this is true. You argue differently. Your values are different. And in fact, you kind of detoxify when you leave New York. The best New Yorkers are the ones that no longer live in New York, unless you just want a really New York experience. And I think Donald Trump has probably mellowed some, having moved out of there. But it's not surprising that he's going to get along with people like Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk, talking about workers and running companies. Most of you don't run companies the size that either of these men do. And you haven't had to bring in stuff in that industry. So you're not going to agree 100%. And that's okay. That's the best part. If you voted for Donald Trump in spite of the idea that he's going to disagree with you on some things, then you can do a thing. It's called major in the majors. I'm going to only look at the big stuff. I want weaponized government handled. And I think Donald Trump is going to be the guy to do that. He's put people in place. He's nominated folks that are going to make that happen. What was the big thing that we really cared about? Did anybody during the campaign talk about high-skilled visa workers coming into the tech industry? Was that even on your mind? Did you consider whether or not an H-1B visa granted to somebody in India who has a master's degree in electrical engineering or computer science, that person was your enemy? Or were you worried about the Trens de Agua and the MS-13s and the assholes that are coming in over the border and killing young women in places like Georgia? Are those people on your radar? Because that's where I'm focused. I'm interested in the immigration problem that exists in the hundreds of thousands and millions. But right now what we're seeing is division, and it's happening in the dozens and the thousands and at the most the tens of thousands. I just want you guys to see this. This is what it looks like. It's called the Apple of Discord. I actually put together the show in a different order, and I'm doing it out of order because this is what makes most sense to me. Do you see this? This is AI, by the way, of course. This is an artificial generation of Laura Loomer holding the golden apple. And what is the golden apple? What is the story of the golden apple? Again, history tells us what happened. This is what happens. It comes from a story called The Judgment of Paris. I'm going to skip to it right now so I can talk about it. The Judgment of Paris, also known as the story of the Apple of Discord, is a story of the wedding of Peleus and Theseus. I'm probably mispronouncing that. But the story essentially goes that the goddess Eris, the goddess of discord, was not invited to the wedding. And she was miffed, as women are wont to do when they are not invited to a party. Men, you know that if you're not invited to the party, that means that's one less wedding gift you probably have to buy. It's one less suit you got to go put on. It's one less tie you got to go adjust. It's one less dry cleaning trip to go get your shirt, right? Not so for the goddess Eris. And so she brings a golden apple. And the story goes, she throws it into the wedding, unseen by others. And there's other goddesses there. Hera, Athena, Aphrodite, all of the great beauties, the goddess of wisdom, the goddess of the hearth, the queen of the goddesses, the goddess of love, etc., right? All of these characters that fill up Greek mythology. And they begin to bicker and fight over who is the fairest. Now, this is theoretically supposed to be a wedding that has nothing to do with any of those people. But they start focusing in, and there's discord, which is, of course, what Eris is the goddess of. And it becomes sort of the this point of contention. And to me, the H-1B visa story, which is really a small number, we'll cover it in a little while, but it's measured in the tens of thousands of people who come here and generate income, generate a work product, and on top of all of that, pay into the American tax system. And then after 3 to 6 years of working and doing a net positive, I would say, in general, they may be a cultural negative. There's really an argument for that. But they're generally a positive sort of situation in the United States. Those people get a chance to stay and be citizens. And if that was the only immigration that we have, the United States would be in awesome shape. Instead, we bring in all kinds of illegals, people running across the border, which we'll talk about in a little bit. We've got countries that are defending it and exporting, whether it be criminals or whether it be low-skilled workers to come in and pick crops and do all kinds of things under the table and drive down wages and work out the American people so that the minimum wage is no longer valuable. They don't speak our language. They didn't come in and qualify. They didn't get vetted. They don't have legal status, and they don't pay into our system, at least not in a traditional way. I'm sure they have sales taxes and stuff. So those people are a real issue, and they come in by the hundreds of thousands, if not millions. Judgment of Paris, something to keep in mind. We're constantly being distracted. And what does that distraction do? Where is it coming from? Let me throw another thing out there that you guys might get a kick out of. I saw this. Because Donald Trump is wrong on several things when he starts talking about visas. Because he speaks in absolutes because he's Donald Trump. This is what he does. This story came out of the Virginian pilot. And it was written on the 29th, which is what, yesterday. Interesting story. A Chinese student's drone got stuck in a tree near the Newport News shipbuilding facility and is now leading to an Espionage Act prosecution. Saw this over on the social media sites. It was covered by someone who took a screenshot and said, but why in the world is a Chinese student flying a drone? And a guy I follow whose name is, he goes by Tim On Point. As I understand it, he's a former Navy SEAL and therefore probably has a little bit of an understanding into national security because all special operators get at least a secret clearance granted and some of them top secret, depending on the work. He wrote the following post, which you see on the screen right now. Because every single Chinese citizen is an agent for China. Every single one. That's a critical thing to understand. It's critical that people who understand that are working in the national intelligence space. And it's also critical that we don't take every single thing that Donald Trump says to be the end all be all, the truth that we all have to accept, whether we like it or not. We can push back because he's a populist. And he actually listens when people don't like it. Remember what happened with the abortion amendments that happened in Florida. He said one thing, people lost their minds. They went and encouraged him to read more and to figure out what his base was about, and then he changed. Now, how he voted is irrelevant because what he said out loud changed some people's minds that are wishy-washy. It's very important. I want you to listen to this. This was listed as breaking news. This is not breaking. This video was recorded, I think, in June or July of 2024. So it goes pre-election. And he's talking about H-1B visas. He's specifically addressing the thing that has become this apple of discord in the late stage, of the lame duck period of Joe Biden's presidency. And it's really important to know that while MAGA people are freaking out about the thing that doesn't really matter nearly as much as the big stuff, there are shenanigans afoot. There are things that are happening, machinations, bird flu, actual illegal immigration, and subversion of our process by people that we pay an awful lot of money to, our allies. Okay, so here's Donald Trump talking about something. I'm going to tell you why he's wrong in 1 second, but I want you to remember the Chinese student story. Chinese student now being prosecuted for the Espionage Act, flying a drone near one of our sensitive ship-making sites. If you don't know about the Newport News shipbuilding sites, they have like the new super tanker. The new super carrier, rather, that the Navy has been designing. Billions of dollars of R&D goes into this thing. Here's Trump talking about something, and we're going to address. He's not always right, but in generality, I don't hate what he has to say, and neither should you. You don't have to get up in arms with it. We just have to know that there has to be nuance, because if you speak in generalities, you're pretty much always wrong.
It's so sad when we lose people from Harvard, MIT, from the greatest schools and lesser schools that are phenomenal schools also. And what I wanted to do, and I would have done this, but then we had to solve the COVID problem because that came in and, sort of dominated for a little while, as you perhaps know. But what I want to do and what I will do is you graduate from a college, I think you should get automatically as part of your diploma a green card to be able to stay in this country. And that includes junior colleges, too. Anybody graduates from a college, you go in there for 2 years or 4 years. If you graduate or you get a doctorate degree from a college, you should be able to stay in this country. And you know more stories than I do, but I know of stories where people graduated from a top college or from a college, and they desperately wanted to stay here. They had a plan for a company, a concept, and they can't. They go back to India. They go back to China. They do the same basic company in those places, and they become multi-billionaires employing thousands and thousands of people, and it could have been done here. And a bigger example is you need a pool of people to work for your companies. You have great companies, and they have to be smart people. Not everybody can be less than smart. You need brilliant people. And we force the brilliant people, the people that graduate from college, the people that are number one in their class from the best colleges, you have to be able to recruit these people and keep the people. It was such a big deal. Somebody graduates at the top of the class. They can't even make a deal with the company because they don't think they're going to be able to stay in the country. That is going to end on day one.
There's a lot of day one talk if you listen to Donald Trump, because he speaks in kind of hyperbole. He speaks in kind of aggressive format, right? The thing that we have to realize is he's wrong on this instance. And for those of you that went to the lesser schools like I did, I don't find any reason to be offended. The reason why is because Donald Trump just says stuff and then he just goes, that probably didn't sound good. It came out and now he tries to adjust, right? He said they went to the top schools or maybe even to the lesser schools that are also fantastic. This is classic Donald Trump. It goes back a long ways. He's been talking like this for a long time. The reason why you don't give everybody who graduates from an American college or university a green card is because a bunch of them are foreign agents, especially the Chinese. I have no ill will towards Chinese American people, people that came here as dissidents, people that have been hunted by the Chinese government. There are a lot of them. And they have lived difficult lives, and they made very, very complicated decisions to evacuate their families from an oppressive regime, and they face death if they go back. And so do their families, and some of them basically knew that they were condemning their parents, their aunts, their uncles, either to work camps or death. That's a real thing, because the Chinese government is ruthless in this way. But a lot of people come here, and they're co-opted into being foreign agents. And they represent the Chinese government, which is how you end up with a student at some sort of God knows what, university nearby in Virginia, flying a drone, trying to take pictures of the General Dynamics National Steel Shipbuilding Company and the BAE ship repair situation that's down in Newport. They're tasked. There were countless cases that we would have of people that were on student visas in the United States. They would come in, they would stay here. They would travel to places to see America, like many students might. If you had somebody, let's say, that came in from Poland or someone from the Czech Republic, or you had a British student, and like my friend Andy Buttons from when I was living in London, he told me he always wanted to go to Kansas City, man. He just always wanted to go there. And I was like, why? And he was like, there's loads of jazz in Kansas City. I lived in Kansas City for a little while. I don't remember there being loads of jazz, but maybe there is loads of jazz, and that's what you want to see. And we got no problem with you coming and seeing that. But if you just always really wanted to go to Cheyenne to go check out Iron Mountain or whatever the heck it is, or you wanted to go see like classified military sites because you just really wanted to see that with your drone because you report back to the Chinese, or you check out tours of the water treatment facilities or the electrical plant or the public safety buildings in Fairfax, Virginia, or Alexandria, right outside the nation's capital, counties that are basically keeping the federal government open and have access to all the people that you might be able to exploit. Like, yeah, maybe we don't want you here. We have to have at least a little bit of an understanding that our open and free society, we will have them take advantage of us. And here's someone, I'm going to kind of work to it. We all have an instinct that there are these ops running. I try to give you guys my thought on the Kansas City shuffle because I'm not sure I always know what the op is. But I usually know that if everybody believes the thing is the op, they probably have the wrong op in mind. They're probably missing what's really going on. Because one of the most powerful ways to obscure things is give people the ability to discover something, let them know that they know what's going on. They're the ones. This is kind of the apple of discord. You toss it in and let them discover it, argue it all out, and then they hash out, oh, this is the psyop. This is the conspiracy against us. And if you're believing that, something else is happening in the background. Always, almost always. Really good ops are run so that you think you've discovered the op, and that is the cover. In the intelligence world, it's referred to as cover for action. So cover for action is a plausible reason that you could be there and it's discoverable. And maybe it's not something that you want. It's not something you necessarily want discovered, but if you do, it's something that you're willing to burn. And that's where the term limited hangout comes from. Some of you have probably heard that. You may not be familiar with, why people say, oh, that's a limited hangout. A limited hangout means the FBI has acknowledged that they had 26 sources that were in the crowd on January 6th. So they acknowledge it. They own it. They're going to have to acknowledge that there were some sources because we know there were 26 of them. That's how many it was. And they've never been prosecuted for criminal activity. And some of them actually did some criminal activity. They went into the building. Got it? Okay. We admit it. We had some people there. but there were definitely no undercovers. And then you realize that the term UCE, undercover, is in fact a brand name, a trademark, a specific role, a type of certification. It doesn't mean they didn't have any agents there. That was never explored. They didn't have the ability when the Inspector General put that out there, okay? That's the limited hangout. That's the Kansas City shuffle. You thought they were hiding it. They were covering it up for 4 years. You work so hard. You finally get the information. You get it out there. And what do you find out? They're going to cop to it. The most minor thing. And then you don't get to hear the real piece. This is the part that I think we should be focusing on. This is where I think we should spend our time. Weaponized government, the things that the Weaponization Committee was actually supposed to be going after. I'm going to play a montage because it's near and dear to my heart. It's something that we've shared in the Suspendables chat. In fact, Garrett O'Boyle, who you guys will see on the American Radicals podcast if you watch tomorrow, and he's one of my very good friends, someone I didn't really know that well in the Bureau, but got to know afterwards. Garrett has been going through line by line the 17,000 pages and searching for our names, and they come up frequently. In fact, they were so frequent that members of the House Democrats that were doing interrogations of former FBI agents, doing depositions of them, they would immediately assume if something happened bad, that it was the result of Kyle Seraphin. And then they were sort of like, shocked to discover sometimes that that person wasn't Kyle Seraphin who did that. It was actually Stephen Friend, our Friendly Friday sort of regular guest. They went out there and they were looking for us because they were trying to prove something. These are the real issues that happen. And these are the things that I want to focus on. I don't want to see Donald Trump worrying about H-1Bs, and I'll tell you why, because the numbers aren't there. Before we do it, let's say thanks to my buddies at S.H.I.E.L.D. I actually got some time over the last couple days. We took some time away, spent some time with family. My dad came into town, and I got to go and take my little guy, my 3-year-old, out to the range, and we got to try out for the first time, he even shot it himself, our S.H.I.E.L.D. Arms SA9. Guys, if you want to check out a really great arms manufacturer, they're in Big Fork, Montana. That is a very America place. They have their own manufacturing facility. They do their own Cerakoting in-house. They're famous for making magazines. The magazines that you're seeing on the screen right there will increase the capacity of a Glock 43X, which is something I carry every single day, or a 48, which is what Steve Friend carries on a daily basis. It will take your gun from a 10 to a 15-round capacity in the exact same footprint without adding any size. It just adds the weight of the extra rounds. Awesome. Promo code Kyle, K-Y-L-E, will save you 10% off on that. If you haven't checked it out, you should do so, right? They feed nicely. In fact, when I was retrofitting one of my father's gun, because he carries a 43X that I used to have in the Bureau, handed it over, and we were using the Glock magazines from the factory, and they were not falling free when you hit the magazine release. But when we put the S.H.I.E.L.D. Arms one in, it was slicker, it's cleaner. They have a steel frame, none of the extra polymer on the outside of it. They work great. I've dropped them in dirt. I've dropped them on concrete. If you guys want to check out a good company making a great product for an easy concealed carry, shieldarms.com, promo code KYLE. Like I said, 10% off statewide. And lastly, their folding ARs are actually like really, really cool. They're a really neat product. You can fold them in half. I went and shot the 9mm with a can, and it's stupid quiet, as one of you said in the chat. It's the nail gun that you have is a little bit louder, your roofing nail gun. Okay, let's pivot over to this thing. Let's look at the House weaponization thing. This has been getting minimal play because we're in such a dense cycle. There's a little bit of music up front, okay? So don't let that dissuade you. We're going to hear Jim Jordan talking for a little bit. I'll probably talk over it a bit too because there's parts of it where it's just music and there's text, but they're talking about the real scandals that happened. And I don't want people to major in the minors, the things that don't matter. These are the things that really matter. This is what we should be hoping for out of a new Trump administration. It says Biden-Harris weaponized the federal government, colluded with big tech. They censored conservatives, targeted people for free speech.
Remember, this is the FBI who said if you're a parent at a school board meeting, you need to be investigated. This is the FBI that said, oh, if you're a pro-life Catholic, you're an extremist. And maybe more importantly, this is the FBI who retaliated against the whistleblowers who came forward and told our committee about all that stuff. And we're supposed to just trust them to do it the right way?
Okay, they raided Donald Trump's house. We had taxpayers that were being harassed by the IRS in their homes. We had the ATF doing the same thing. You had members of the Democrat Party. People like Tulsi Gabbard, RFK, also targeted by a weaponized government. And they're telling us that they created the House Select Subcommittee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government. Again, this attacked all Americans. This is the real stuff. This is the reason why. That and unchecked immigration illegally. stopping all the folks that were doing the work that needed to be done. Okay? This is what people should be paying attention to. They need to recall that the Biden-Harris administration did some really awful stuff, and that we've shared through whistleblower testimony. None of us have been made whole yet. Not one of us. They talk about how the whistleblowers came forward and they were able to testify. You got Marcus Allen on screen right there, that the Catholic document that I exposed was rescinded. None of those things fixed the problem, not even a little bit. And so our hope is that we see mechanisms that get rid of the problem, the underlying problem. Who cares about a bunch of people coming in and tech? Like, is it an issue? Sure. But we can't major in those things. We can't just sit there all day long. How about another thing that's a real issue? This is another piece of weaponized government. The spies who hate us. This is a great article written by Jeffrey A. Tucker by the Brownstone Institute. And this was sent to me over by George Hill. Remember CISA? The people that were going to go after cognitive infrastructure, they were going to police the things in your gray matter. That's where that censorship came from, by the way. That's how it was justified of the federal government. We have to recall that CISA was created and set up and instigated by Donald Trump. He caved, essentially, to the popular opinion that the Russians were infiltrating our elections, and therefore we needed the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA. It was a 2017 executive order in his first year in the presidency. This should probably be rescinded, because the information that has come out of it is that they have leaned on a bunch of NGOs and tech companies to censor and stop, to pull the things that you wanted to say. If you had questions about lockdowns, if you were going to be someone who thought masking was inappropriate, the way my dad did, and had his YouTube channel censored. If you were questioning a vaccine, not that people couldn't get it. I don't remember anybody saying that nobody should get it. It's just like, I don't want it. And if you want it, you get it. And then let me know how it goes. Let me know in 10 years if you're still feeling great about it. Right? I don't know that any of us wanted to outlaw the vaccine. We just didn't want mandates on it. We didn't want anybody telling us what to do with our own bodies. Amusingly enough, the My Body, My Choice crowd fell apart on that one, didn't they? So there's a lot of questions that we were supposed to be able to ask because we are supposed to have a free society. But instead, our federal government under CISA, weaponized under the Biden-Harris administration, was able to do things using cutouts like NGOs. They went through universities. They created private fact checkers that now became the arbiters of truth in truly Orwellian fashion. And those are all ops. Every one of those things was an intelligence op. They tried to act like the things that they were doing was to our benefit. But the thing that benefits Americans is freedom. I've got a clip from Milton Friedman. If you guys watch Bongino's show, I'm sure you've heard this a couple of times. It is one of the great clips. It's about agency. It's about autonomy. It's the reason why government is the worst solution. I want you to consider this. I'll put this up on the locals channel as well. So KyleSeraphin.com, if you guys want to sign up and grab that, you can get it. I'll put it on the open post. It's not my material, so I will share it openly. Milton Friedman talking about what? How you spend money, how money is spent, and the way that you spend it. Anybody that's ever worked in government knows government spends money atrociously because it's not their money being spent on not them. This is how Steve Friend's boss, while he was working in Indian country, he couldn't get a new printer so that he could print out the documents to do his job, but they were able to buy a $42,000 ATV that they only used once or twice a year and didn't even have room to hold on to. It's not my money spent for not me. That's how you do that. It's the single biggest argument against government. It's like, I don't even hate the idea of charity or taking care of the poor. I just hate the idea of the biggest animal doing it. You want to know how to help people? Do it individually. Do it with a group of your friends. Do it locally in your small community. Do it with voluntary funds that you take out of your pocket and you give because you think it's the right thing to do. Don't mandate it to come from me and then give it to our friends down in Mexico to use it for God knows what, like working against us. More on that in 1 second. Let's do this clip here. Again, the way that we spend money, the reason why government at every level is basically the worst solution, even when it's the only solution, is because of how they look at money, because it's not theirs being spent on not them. which is the worst category?
Well, you know, you can spend your own money on yourself. And when you spend your own money on yourself, you're very careful of what you spend it on, and you make sure that you get the most for your dollar. You can spend your own money on somebody else. You give gifts to other people. You take people out to dinner. And when you spend your own money on somebody else, you're very careful that you don't spend too much. You try to keep down the amount you spend, but you don't worry very much about what the other fellow's getting from it. You don't pay anything like as much attention to the gifts you buy for other people as to the things you buy for yourself. Or you can spend somebody else's money, as when you're spending the government's money. I say the government's money, the taxpayers' money, which the government has control over. Now you're spending somebody else's money. Let's say you're spending your boss's money. You're out to lunch on a expense account, but you're spending it on yourself. You're very careful that you get good things for your money. You try to have a good lunch and pick the right things, but you're not very much worried about whether you get the cheapest. Spend all you want. Spend all you want, and you'll be careless. Now, what happens when you spend somebody else's money on somebody else? You're a distributor of welfare funds. Well, you're interested in making your own life as good as you can, and most people have humane instincts and want to do the best they can, but you're not going to be anything like as careful in spending somebody else's money on somebody else. So there are 4 ways in which you can spend money.
There's 4 ways. My money on me, my money on you, your money on me, somebody else's money on somebody else. And that's it. And in that order is how much you care about them. Imagine this. This story, my wife brought this to my attention today. Mexico is alerting citizens of Mexico about to be detained in the United States through an app. Why are they in the United States? Oh, because they're here illegally. And how are they doing this? Let's just read about it. It comes from Town Hall. Sarah Arnold reporting here from yesterday. Says they've launched a new mobile app, they being Mexico, designed to help illegal immigrants in the United States receive immediate alerts if Donald Trump, the president-elect, or his border czar tries to detain them. The app, which aims to assist illegal aliens facing potential deportations in the United States, quickly allows them to notify family members, consulates, or legal representatives about their deportation. The move comes as Mexico intensifies efforts to protect its citizens amid rising tensions over Trump's incoming immigration policies. Again, Mexican citizens illegally in the United States. This is what Donald Trump ran on, right? This was a big deal. Also, today's Catholic Vote loop, if you check it out, one of the top stories is that a federal judge has actually told the Biden administration, stop selling off those pieces of the border wall. That came courtesy of Ken Paxton here in Texas, filing suit in federal court, and a judge agreeing that they do not have the ability to sell it off, and now there should be some ongoing investigations. Those are majoring in the majors. People taking millions, if not tens of millions of US dollars made into very expensive steel walls that are supposed to go and block our border, things that were already spent by the American government, and the Biden administration trying to sell them off pennies for the dollar out of Nogales and Tucson and other places in Arizona, trying to get rid of these border wall sections and sell them on government auction sites so that they're not available to Trump when he gets in office. That is a major in the majors. How about this? The foreign minister, Juan Ramon de la Fuentes. He described the app that they are creating in Mexico as a panic button. Apparently they have time and money. I wonder if they have some H-1B types that are creating their apps. He said, in case you find yourself in a situation where detention is imminent, you push the alert button and it sends the signal to the nearest consulate. Yeah, Mexican consulate. He said that they have strengthened their consular staff by hiring 329 legal representatives. This is the government of Mexico doing this. The app will be ready in January, just as Donald Trump takes office and ignites his immigration policies. He has assured illegal aliens who are Mexican citizens that the Know Your Rights program within the Mexican government would respond immediately to enforce scenarios or other intimidating actions, and they would defend their citizens' human rights in the United States in strict compliance with international law. Interestingly enough, that sort of focus on quote-unquote human rights was a Jimmy Carter legacy. Go figure. I was curious, how much money does the United States government give to the Mexican government? And here it is. In 2023, the last fully reported year, $232 million. $17.5 million was strengthen the humanitarian response for vulnerable people on the move in Mexico, whatever the hell that means. Another $17 million for Mexico travel and logistics training. Okay, good. We're helping Mexicans move Mexicans and other non-Mexicans into the United States. We are paying for it. And then we are going to be paying, apparently, because money is fungible and it can be used for anything, into building apps to try to subvert our economic policies and our immigration policies, to the tune of $250 million. By the way, those spikes happened under Obama. If you look at the spikes on that graph, they're basically about the $150 million in foreign aid through the Bush years. This is during the GWAT. And then as it came in, Obama, the first huge spike is on that graph. It goes in 2009. The first year that Obama was in office, it was bumped up to over $500 million. And then $750 million. In 2010. I'm just doing it from memory here. Then a little bit less, so like in the 450 range, and then it kind of spiked around. But the biggest spending was done during Obama. They had far less of it now. Donald Trump kind of tamped it down a bit. When you give people money, theoretically, you can ask things of them. What you wouldn't expect is that they would use your money to screw you and try to keep people that don't belong in your country in your country. That's what I would think. That's the way that I would operate. I would have the expectation that there'd be some loyalty because that's a lot of money. And the other thing is that a huge chunk of the Mexican GDP is actually money sent home. We looked it up the other day, and I don't remember the exact dollar amount, but it's in the billions of money that is sent home by these migrant workers that come into the United States. There is a legal program that you can do that, by the way. You can legally come into the United States, have legal work authorization under a guest worker program, and then you have to go home. But if you come here illegally, and then the Mexican government is going to fund your ability to stay here, I have a problem with it. And I think many of you probably do as well. And as I said, some of this is a legacy. Jimmy Carter, who was a champion of human rights. He's being whitewashed in his death. There he is. I think that he might actually be dead in that picture. From what I can tell, he looks ancient. He died at 100 years old. Just letting you know that only the good die young, and the people that failed tend to live forever. There he is, former President Jimmy Carter, celebrated champion of human rights, so saith Time magazine, and ABC News, and NBC News, and CBS News, and all of these people. They love it. Absolutely love Jimmy Carter. Died at 100 years old. And they went on to talk about his Nobel Peace Prize, which he got long after he got out of the White House in 2002. I saw many posts on X where people were remembering being in fuel lines because of his energy policy was atrocious. I saw many members of the military that are absolutely furious about his relationship with the special operations community, completely dicked up. Desert One allowed Americans to remain hostages, weakened us on the world stage. It kind of sounds like another really old guy that's in office, Joe Biden. The funny thing is you always hear that he was a nice guy. He was a nice man and a terrible president. I actually see that in our chat right now, popping up. Throw it on the screen here. Right? That's the claim. He's a nice guy, but he was a bad president. I've heard people say that he wasn't really that nice of a guy, too. So I have no idea. I never met him. But he does look like he's about to die. This is what he looked like when he supposedly was voting for Kamala Harris. Thank God he hung around. I said he probably died a couple years ago, if that's the way that he looked. Which he did look like that. On the screen here, you're seeing basically the skeleton of Jimmy Carter sitting in, I think, a wheelchair at 100 years old. That's not quality of life. That just is another one of those things. Imagine that. They want that guy to live to the bitter end, and they want to kill off babies. I just can't help but put the two ideas in my head at all times. We have to keep really old, useless politicians that weakened America. We have to make sure that they stay alive long enough to vote in our election. I mean, it doesn't seem like that actually should stop them. There's plenty of examples of dead people voting, right? For Democrats, of course. But here we have Jimmy Carter sitting there. He had it in there. The media is looking for mistakes now. They want to portray him as a failure. This is Time magazine kind of whitewashing his story as well. Again, I'm telling you, it's an overwhelming push. That's the big news story of the day. Not the thing that's going on in the background, which I'm going to share with you right now, which I think is maybe the craziest piece of it. Fauci, Birx, Lena Wynn, we talked about people that have questionable loyalties. There's some real questions about this lady. Fauci is talking about a virus. We're going back to the panic. We're going back to the pandemics era. Why? Because that's the thing that they were able to derail. When you have something that works, you might as well go and try to run it again. And it does seem like you've got people on the political left right now, and the mainstream media is jumping to it because look at this. This is a clip from what? Science Quickly? I don't know. This is like a little bit lower tier, but you've got people as big as CBS News talking about the bird flu, which has never jumped from person to person yet in this particular situation. But we got to stir up fear somehow, and we already know what worked about derailing Donald Trump. How do we throw the apple of discord? Because I think people are about played out on the immigrant situation. It's kind of run its course, and it ran its course kind of during a non-news cycle over the Christmas holiday. You guys can be upset about it all you want. There's reasons. I'll show you the numbers in a sec. But I'm more interested in what this kind of shenanigans is going on, the machinations that are happening when no one's looking, because this guy seems like objective evil. And he's talking about something that I start listening. When Dr. Fauci and Birx from the old pandemic response team start joining forces again with what looks like a Chinese agent, I want to know. And I want to keep my tabs on that. And I'm fine with dealing with H-1B visas later. People who come in and do computer programming, even if they steal American jobs, which they very well may. That's certainly an issue. How about H1, what is this called? H1N5? Why do they all have to sound the same? Here we go. Let's get Fauci's take on it, because it's going to go. Remember, there are other animals than birds and cows on farms. This is some novel, groundbreaking information he's putting out here.
Now, let me tell you the sobering news. The sobering news is that can change because the virus infects more than one species, and we know it can infect pigs. Pigs are on farms with chickens and with cows, and chickens and cows can infect with their virus a pig, and then a human virus can go into pig, and then you could get a reassortment of a virus that has some of the dangerous qualities of H5N1 and some of the capability of spreading from human to human of a human virus. So that's what public health officials are concerned about, that when you have the circulation of this virus in multiple species, including a mixing bowl species like a pig, you might get a reassortment and a mutation that could make this something we really have to be concerned about. And that's
Are you guys tracking this? Like, farms and ranches have different types of animals on them. And they might have a mixing bowl animal, which is the first time I've ever heard a pig called that. So we could have H5N1, the bird flu, jump into a pig, and then maybe a human virus jump into a pig, and then those viruses could have a mixing bowl effect and have a pig baby that we eat the pig, and then we become sick with the bird flu, or some such nonsense. Okay, sure. That's Fauci. But Fauci's saying this publicly, and he's not the only one. It's time for you to start masking and testing again. Why? Because we need to do anything we can. Donald Trump said he was going to change some things, and anything that can put the brakes on that is on the table. Here's CNN bringing on that lady with the scarf, Dr. Birx, who I remember seeing in the COVID response. She's not very good at TV. Then I'm going to show you someone who really is dangerous, because she is good at TV, and she is convincing to people that are listening. But if I'm listening right, she's got that little bit of touch of Shanghai. And I'm not trying to be ethnically focused. I'm just saying she grew up and was born in China. She was there until she was 8. We're going to talk about Lena Wynn, who has been in an awful lot of very prominent medical positions and has had a really, really stellar rise into the public's awareness. I'm going to kind of hit her high points because Jeremy Ryan Slade, who we referenced earlier, talks about the fall of the Roman Empire, did a kind of a deep dive on some of the things that she's popped into. And it's pretty illuminating. If you follow me on Twitter this morning, you probably already saw this. Again, less into the H-1B visa, more into the H5N1 virus. This is kind of where I think that the turn should be. And of course, they have the same things. Here we go. Dr. Scarf here wearing it.
But it sounds like it doesn't. It sounds like from what you're laying out, you don't think this country has learned from the COVID pandemic. And there's not a sense of urgency right now.
Our
that should
agencies
match the
are
moment.
making the same mistakes they made with COVID. The number 2 principle of pandemic is detect. And the only way to detect for viruses is to test. You cannot see a virus through symptoms. You miss so many cases. Yet we're still talking about flu-like illness.
I think this is the reason why I don't work at the FBI right now, if I'm being totally honest with you all. It's because I had this weird idea that if I didn't have symptoms, that I wouldn't test for a disease. And in doing so, I'm not going to go expose myself to a bunch of ethylene oxide shoved up my nose. Never before have we done that. Not in America. We've never prophylactically tested people that didn't have symptoms for a disease. I have no idea what the hell they're talking about. I drove into the sensitive site at Quantico. It's on the military base. It's on the Marine Corps base. Then you drive into the FBI's thing. I drove onto the base, no problem. You just flash your ID. The guy was wearing a mask. This is back during the COVID nonsense. And then I got to the FBI's gate, and they were like taking my temperature with a little heat gun or whatever on the forehead. And that was supposed to say something. No symptom, carry on. Everybody got it, so I didn't object to it. And then they were like, by the way, we know you've already had COVID. We know that you already had it on duty. We need you to test for it every freaking 2 days to make sure that you're not bringing it in to the office. And I went, no. This whole, like, we got to start testing thing, it's very interesting. I told you I was going to get to Lena Wynn. We only got a couple minutes left. Let's do that real quick. Here she is talking about Fauci's animal jump theory and then the testing thing, which is where it gets real shady.
We're already seeing this year that there have been a number of mammalian species close to humans that now have bird flu outbreaks. We have outbreaks in poultry in all 50 states. 16 states have outbreaks in cattle. In California, in the last 30 days, there have been more than 300 herds that tested positive. And now we have 66 cases of bird flu in humans. And this is almost certainly a significant undercount because we have not been doing nearly enough testing, so we really don't know the extent of bird flu that's out there in humans.
We don't know the extent. We got to do more testing. How much more? What would she be doing if she was going to advise the Biden administration? If she was going to do the thing that the Chinese government wanted her to do, what would she tell Biden to do? Biden seems pretty amenable to what the Chinese are interested in. Looks like this.
What should be happening in the Biden administration right now that isn't going on?
Yeah, there are two main things that they should be doing in the days that they have left. The first is to get testing out there. I feel like we should have learned our lesson from COVID that just because we aren't testing, it doesn't mean that the virus isn't there. It just means that we aren't looking for it. We should be having rapid tests, home tests available to all farm workers, to their families, for the clinicians taking care of them so that we aren't waiting for public labs and CDC labs to tell us what's bird flu or not. And the second very important thing is this is not like the beginning of COVID where we were dealing with a new virus, we didn't have a vaccine. There actually is a vaccine developed already against H5N1. The Biden administration has contracted with manufacturers to make almost 5 million doses of the vaccine. However, they have not asked the FDA to authorize the vaccine. There's research done on it. They could get this authorized now and also get the vaccine out and to farm workers and to vulnerable people. I think that's the right approach because we don't know what the Trump administration is going to be doing around bird flu.
I know what I'm going to be doing, not taking whatever she just said, ever. I don't want anything to do with it. Let me just read you a little background on her, okay? She's 41 years old. She's incredibly accomplished for that age. She's pretty. She's very well-spoken, as you heard. There's a big difference between her and Dr. Birx being on TV. No dead air. That is a skill set that is not easily created. Even in person, it's difficult to do TV because it's compressed and it's tight and you have to get a message across. She does a very good job of that. She was born in Shanghai. I wasn't just saying the word Shanghai because I think it's fun, although it is a fun word. She was born in Shanghai in 1983. She's younger than I am. And she managed to get her MD, plus she has a master's in some sort of public health from Oxford. Okay? She's a doctor, emergency doctor. And in her time in the United States, apparently her parents came here and were like some low-level workers. The stuff that she's been able to get herself associated with in the United States is incredible. She was a voice of the Mpox outbreak. She was a voice of the COVID-19 pandemic. She's an on-air analyst on CNN, public health professor at George Washington University. She's a non-resident fellow, senior fellow at the Brookings Institute, which is very left-wing. She's a columnist at the Washington Post. She's a medical analyst on television. We just said that one. The other wild things is that she was the president of Planned Parenthood, wasn't she? And she was apparently an emergency room physician working on the Boston bombing. Like, how did that happen? How did she find herself in all these places at all these times? It's fairly incredible if you want to get right down to it. She's had a lot of very senior level positions. She's had access to things. Here, I think I actually got the clip here. Let me just show you this. This is the Boston Marathon bombing, which our friend George Hill was one of the supervisors investigating. Here she is, fully polished, ready to talk about things, and sounds like she's ready for TV right then.
Lena Wen, she's an emergency room physician who was working at Massachusetts General Hospital the day of the terror attack. She also works at Brigham and Women's Hospital. So you were at Massachusetts General Monday. What happened?
Oh, it was a horrific day. We had no idea what was coming. It was 3 o'clock and we heard that there were 2 explosions, but we didn't know where. We had no idea how many people were coming to us.
How many people came?
It seemed like dozens, and it was. It was probably nearly 3 dozen patients in 2 hours or so.
And was the hospital ready for it? I heard from Dr. Walls from the other Brigham and Women's Hospital that because of all the drills the hospitals here have been running since 9/11, you were unbelievably prepared.
Technically and medically, we were ready. We had done drills. We knew what to do with each individual patient who came in.
Wow. She also was a commissioner of public health in Baltimore. That's a lot of different places that she's touched. Los Angeles, Baltimore, Boston, Washington, D.C. She's everywhere. How is she able to promote so quickly? How is she able to polish that message? That's what an op looks like to me. Do I have any proof of it? No. But I do have this. Chinese student drone got stuck in a tree near the Newport News shipbuilding facility. Sometimes you can look at the way these things work and the way that everybody just seems to celebrate one person and elevate them above all logical understanding. And that's what an op looks like. Things getting pulled, people getting thrown out there. That's why I'm less interested in this, the debate about H-1Bs. Because there's obviously something that is being coordinated in the background right now. And we are talking about the smallest portion of immigration. For whatever it's worth, I ran the numbers over here for CBS's story. The U.S. caps the number of H-1B visas at 65,000 new visas each year. That is a negligible problem when we're talking about millions in illegal immigration. They can also expand it to take another 20,000 if people have a master's degree or a PhD, a terminal degree in their field. The visa is valid for 3 years, but can be extended an additional 3 years. That's the 6 years people always hear about. And then many of those people end up coming in and staying in the United States. Do they change our culture? Yes. Has that been the case for a long time? Yes. People come in here seeking skilled and unskilled labor. And generally speaking, it was not as big a deal when they were coming out of European cultures. But this argument has been had for generations. You can go back and watch Gangs of New York if you guys are interested in seeing people get pissed about people coming in and changing our culture. They all do. The key is that they eventually have to assimilate. And I will tell you, generally speaking, that first generation that's here, they might be a little bit more, but the second generation, by the time they're born in America, you get guys like Kash Patel, who was born in New York. And I don't have a problem with a Kash Patel. I'm thrilled about that guy. And I don't care if we don't share the same religion or the same ethnic heritage. That's not a problem. If you come to America and you want to do meritocracy, if you want to be great and you want to make America great, we don't have any issues. Let me tell you some fun things that I saw. This is kind of a joke that's got a 2-part setup. Number one is it's really hard to understand people that speak with a different accent, even if they speak the same language. My children are starting to learn that. It's also hard to find out that women who wear hoodies and baseball hats think that they're men. My wife occasionally wears a baseball hat when it's sunny out, and she wears hoodies quite a bit. I didn't know that, so I'm hoping we get a tax break for this sort of thing. This is Elliot Page, previously known as a female, now believing she's a male, talking about the things she would advise herself. As we go into the new year, we often look back and do retrospectives and say, hey, what would you do differently? What would you advise your younger self? This is a 2-part setup for our palate cleanse. I'm going to first disgust you, and then I'm going to make you laugh. Here we go. This is Elliot Page giving advice to her younger self.
My message to my younger self would just be like, you know who you are, and please embrace that. I feel for me, I understood my truth. I felt it very strongly, and it was all of these external forces and noises that pushed and pulled, and made me sort of lose track of who I was. And so I guess to my younger self, I'd say, that discomfort and that pain you're feeling, that is not yours, that is theirs.
Theirs. I don't know if that theirs is like a plural individual, like a they, them situation. Is not really relevant. Okay. How about better advice that some of us can all kind of lean into as we begin? This is an advice from a father. Listen closely. I'm going to play it for you twice because you're going to need it twice. This is not what you think it's going to sound like.
What's the advice you give to your younger self?
Spend less time with the kids.
Spend less?
Less time with the kids. They just waste your time.
I can't believe a father would say spend less time with your kids.
No, dickheads.
What's he saying?
Dickheads.
Dickheads!
Spend less time with dickheads. That's really good advice. Forget about living your truth, Ellen Elliott. I think you should spend less time with dickheads. This should be the New Year's resolution that we make here at the Kyle Seraphin Show in general. I'm going to play it for you one more time because you kind of have to hear it twice. Listen the first time. He says it the same way. But Kiwis, they're really hard to understand. Who knew? Sometimes we have to get a little translator even for English.
What's the advice you give to your younger self?
Spend less time with the kids.
Dickheads.
Spend less?
Less time with the kids. They just waste your time.
I can't believe a father would say spend less time with your kids.
No, dickheads.
What's he saying?
Dickheads.
Dickheads!
We're going to spend less time with dickheads. That's going to be our New Year's resolution. I hope you guys are having a fantastic start to your week. I look forward to seeing you guys a couple days. We're going to take off some days for the new year because it's family time before we get launched right in. This is going to be a really interesting year. I don't know where it's going to go. I can't make any promises. If you guys want to keep up with what we're doing over here at the show, go to KyleSeraphin.com and join the Locals channel where I will communicate all of the insider baseball and you guys can make fun of my shooting or tell me that I shouldn't wear ear pro with suppressors. We've got some fun stuff out there. All right. Look forward to seeing you guys over there. Thanks so much for joining us today. Have a wonderful beginning of your week. God bless you. And I will see you again tomorrow for the Kyle Seraphin Show.
Thanks for listening to the Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.